Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell.
All right, it's time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with us tonight, John McAndrew. John, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Michael. Good to see you.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, you've got the brand new album out, Better Side of Me. And interestingly, your producer, Denny Seiwell, has been a guest on this show previously. Knowing his very diverse background, jazz and pop and rock and everything, that had to be an interesting thing for you to work with him. How did that come about?
Well, Denny and I have known each other for a long time, well over 20 some years, and we've done some pretty good gigs together. And I had initially had a date set to do an album in LA with a producer who worked in the film industry. And I've been lucky to get some songs and movies. And just by fate, something happened to him. He cut his finger and some other stuff. And I'm always on the phone with Denny. And Denny said, why don't you come out and let's record a couple of songs. That's all he said, which we've been threatening to do for a long time. So Denny had just done a project. He was in Wings, and they did a bunch of Wings songs with Fernando Perdomo, who's a unbelievable guitar player, multi-instrumentalist, has a studio. He said, let's go over to Fernando's. Well, we had planned to do 2 songs, and we recorded 2 songs, and we went, this sounds really great. Why don't we do an album? And no intent of just doing my songs, And the fire was lit, and it took a while, but we've completed it,
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. You mentioned about doing an album.
Yeah.
This sounds like an album where it's a musical journey through it, as opposed to, okay, we've got this many songs, or like it used to be, we can fit this many minutes on this side of the cassette. So the song order is going to be based on runtime as opposed to the musical flow, of the music. So, but this is something you put it on and you let it play. You take that journey from start to finish.
Well, and that's pretty old school. And, there may be some people that are listening to this that, album and play the whole thing through is kind of different, and I think we've all been caught up in that as well. But we were intentional in, I look at it as when I do a concert, and playing live is the best thing in the world there is. So hopefully we do the same here. You start off with something that's a little up tempo, and then we slowly get into some songs with some messages, and then we mix up kind of types of music. And we're all older musicians, and Denny and myself, and I'm a piano player, and I cut my chops in bars playing jazz and blues, and while doing that was singing my own material, which I love to do. And so that we hope that is reflected in the album also. And then we got into the song order, and my grandson William goes, John, people don't do that. It doesn't matter what order the songs are. They just listen to the song. And it's interesting because he's listened to the album now, and he listened all the way through. And now I think he gets what we're talking about as well. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, for me personally, there's some records where, say, you put on, you listen to the whole thing. I've also encountered albums where you go, you know what? There's 3 or 4 songs I really like, and the rest of it, yeah. And I guess they just label those as like singles artists. They got some great singles, but the rest of it doesn't work. I like albums like yours where you put it on and you just enjoy the whole thing, to where it doesn't sound like you've got, okay, we know these are our 3 really good songs, and then we're gonna pad the rest of it. This is, you go through it, like I say, it takes you on a musical journey.
Yeah. Well, the responsibility, well, I feel is you got to have good songs. And I had a pile of songs that weren't recorded yet. And I threw some at Denny. And this is where Denny was really a good producer. And I've worked with a bunch of good producers, the Muscle Shoals guys, Roger Hawkins, the drummer. I was really green then, and I'm just somewhat green now. But and I've done a bunch of projects where I wouldn't let anybody kind of suggest we do this and not that. And so we wrote a lot of songs. Denny would go, "That's great." Denny would go, "That isn't." We dug up some old songs and redid them, and we probably recorded 17, 18 tracks somewhere in there. And then at the very end, we were thinking of the concept, Michael, of the record, because that's part of what you do. And I'm looking at all this music and stuff, and I went in and wrote a song in about 15 minutes, and it's called Better Side of Me. And I was just, I thought, well, this would be a nice little title. I hope you see the best of me, not only on the record and through the music, but, personally on a day-to-day basis. I hope we just do the best we can. We're human beings. We're going to bump into stuff, bump into people, make mistakes, say and do stuff we wish we hadn't, but the idea is just that by the end of the day, hope you saw the better side of me. And I remember sending that to Denny, and he immediately went, "Yep, that'll work," And then my thing, Michael, I'm sure you had a lot of artists talk about this, is I got to play them live, and I'll know if it's a decent song or not. With a wide array of people, young kids, old kids. You'd be surprised. Young people are really a lot smarter. Music, in fact, their brains are wired to really hear a lot of different stuff that maybe you and I didn't, because we grew up with a lot more limited variety of music. But I'll play these songs for the kids and for older people, and that's kind of where they get tested, And
Yeah.
fun. The album has been really fun.
Well, one of the keys, it doesn't matter what you're doing, but chemistry between those involved, to me, is what makes the difference between, whether it's something that's good or really good. And you can hear the chemistry between you and Denny and Fernando on this, because you complement each other very nicely.
Well, thank you. I hope you're kind of talking about the little dance between the guitar and the piano, because it's the trick. And I've had some really good musicians here in Nashville teach me a lot. One of my better friends, his name is Jack Dills, and he played with a band called Highway 101. And they were a great country band and a vocal group. And I've done recording with Jack, and what he's kind of taught me is what not to put in there, because I have to admit, I grew up in the bars, and as the more notes you get in, the better you think you are. But I think, living in Nashville with artists and musicians, guys like Jack and others, taught me, what not to do. And I think with Fernando and I, we kind of do this little dance, and then mixing it and playing the parts, that's what I kind of like to hear. And it's not real predictable, and some of the stuff is, that's a little different. And then Denny holding everything down, he's just like the steady old rock in the back, and made a lot of decisions about if this should be in there, this shouldn't be in there. And I think we didn't overproduce, which we tried not to do, get too much going on,
Well, that dance between guitar and piano you talk about, the opening track, Only You, that's a prime example to where you're feeding off of each other.
Yeah. That was the first song we recorded, and that's one take, boom. I think I fixed a couple vocals, and that was the demoed piano in the studio. And, that's that kind of energy that you talk about. which I think a lot of musicians talk about first take kind of wonderment. We just, boom, we went, and that thing just shot out. That kind of inspired us, and I had not really heard Fernando play, and he's unbelievable. He's there engineering and playing, and we went, wow. We listened back on that, and it just had that little thing in it. It just sounded great.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned inspiration for you. Yeah. Who've been some of the artists that have been an inspiration for you, who've really kind of guided the direction that you've gone musically?
Well, so it spans, some decades. I remember early on Jackson Browne. Now, Doctor My Eyes, that particular song, the way he played the left hand, and that was something that I could do. It was one of the first songs I learned to play halfway decent. I don't know if I ever did it very well in front of a live audience, was that Jackson Browne song. And then I remember early on listening to music. I'll go way back, Michael. I was 11 years old, and my older brother was a great musician. He played in kind of Grateful Dead type bands, but he was always listening to music. And then my father played with Stan Kenton Orchestra briefly, but he was a jazz clarinet player. So upstairs we had Dave Brubeck playing, and then downstairs we had the Grateful Dead. But one morning I was just a young kid laying in bed, and my brother put this record on. And it was the Chambers Brothers. And it was the old song, People Get Ready. And something about that song just comforted me, and the lyric and the simple music. And I think that was the first day I felt the power of music to change what I felt. And then it moved into piano playing wise. I listened to Oscar Peterson, and then I just want to quit. So I don't even want to play piano. There's an old guy named Gene Harris, though. He's a blues musician and a singer, and he played blues and sang, and I like Gene Harris. And then Jackson Browne, and then it's wide variety. And then later on, I listened to a Joni Mitchell record, with open tuning. So some of that has influenced me in how I play open tunings on guitars. It's just, and it's really amazing. I don't know if I sought it out so much as just somebody would put it on, and I go, whoa, and I would notice, what is that? Just beautiful. Mm-hmm. And then I think ultimately Ray Charles just singing those old standard kind of playing the piano, banging his foot. It's just good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think if you are, passionate about music, whether you're a musician or not, you absorb everything that you hear, and it all becomes a part of you. And it takes you to where you start to hear the influences of these people that you're liking. And then you end up going down rabbit holes going, oh, well, you know what? I'm hearing a little bit of so-and-so in this, mm-hmm. or you don't recognize it, but you like it. So then you end up, tracking down, okay, what influence was that? And then you open yourself to a whole nother, array of music, which is why I loved liner notes back when, you actually had physical music, to where you could, you hear something like, wow, I really like the piano on that. Oh, well, that was so-and-so. Or, man, that guitar was really cool. That's, and then, or it was produced by, somebody. And then I'd go searching through like the old, the used record bins at my local record stores. And it's like, oh, okay, well, this guy produced, this. Oh, yeah. I like that. And then you give it a shot, and it was just, a really cool thing that nowadays it's not as easily done as it was.
Well, and then you find
40 years ago.
I didn't know he played bass on that. He played bass on that stuff. You start to learn where the little communities are and where some of these really great rhythm sections, and bands. You look at Denny Seiwell's history and notes. Holy cow! You can't. His jazz stuff, he is over the top, and then to play with McCartney and to play pop music. And he just, when he decided he'd produce the album, you know, I'd been hoping he would for 20 years, you know, and when it finally happened, I went, wow, you know, and I was not, my fantasy about that was not disappointed, you know, just his experience, you know, the experiences that he's had. And, you know, I'm just thrilled that he and Fernando are on. There's, you know, Steve Carl's on this thing too. He's pretty darn good. He played a little some strings, and I just go, wow, you know, lucky me.
Exactly. Well, yeah, you mentioned like all the stuff that Denny played on, where within just a couple of years, he played on Cold Spring Harbor, Billy Joel's debut.
Yeah.
Then Stanley Turrentine.
Yeah.
And then McCartney within like a 2-year period.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just crazy.
what? Yeah. And he, you know, I can fawn over him, but he earned all that. You know, he went in and really earned that. And in New York City, it's tough because there's a lot of really good players in there. But I think Denny could read, and his passion. I mean, it just and for McCartney to do that really says an awful lot, you know. So love you, Denny. You know, appreciate you.
Yeah. Now tell me this: were you, yeah, as you're hearing this music as a kid, were you a big record buyer?
Not a lot, because my brothers were, you know, it's funny. My brother played bass, and my father was a musician, and I initially was like a fine artist, but I was sucking it in all the time. And really, you know, I have to tell you on a personal level, I didn't realize that music was my medicine. There was stuff going on in our lives, you know, and that, like, people get ready, but music became my medicine. And I started to sing first. You know, I would sneak over, I guess when I was 4 years old, across the street in Wisconsin, my grandparents' house. And they said all I did was go in that bathroom and sing. Now, I wouldn't do it at home because my brothers probably would have made fun of me, but there was something about the sound of the voice and singing, and that's really first what grabbed me. But then being around the house all the time, Dad and my brother, they were always playing music. So I think I was wrapped in it like a blanket, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, with this being your 14th album, correct? It's 14th, right?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
What is something that, like, as you look at your catalog, all the works that you've done, what's something that, a few of the things that you've learned in making records that you are able to apply to this one?
Well, that's a good question, because some of the albums were self-produced, you know, some were, and I look back at all of them, and I don't know if you have any other artists like this, but I kind of, once I'm done with something, I don't want to listen to it anymore, because I'll just find some little rub or something I should have written better or done better. So maybe what I've learned is to stop doing that. This is all a process of learning. This album, most of the progress was made in, I think, learning how to write songs a little better and getting a little better at lyrics. I can listen back to some records, and I just wrote songs really fast, and we went into the studio, and then I think back, and my little grandson William, man, he just loves to play them all the time, but I'm going, oh man, it didn't need that long ending. And it didn't need that long intro. And maybe the intros can be a little more interesting. And it didn't need that other verse. And so I start to slowly learn. Some people, I think I had one big learning curve, and that was getting signed to Malaco Music and Muscle Shoals Studios. That really jumped me up, because I came down from Minneapolis, played with a lot of really good musicians. But now this is the real old school music business, you know. And these guys have made hundreds of hit songs that play at every drive-in in the world. And so they taught me some stuff about arranging. So I think I had a little bit of that in me. And then coming to Nashville, learning more about lyric and say more with less, but still be yourself. I tend to like to be a little loosey-goosey, and and Ray Charles is like that, so it's okay to be loosey-goosey. I'm not Charles, but I've kind of learned to adjust those things. So I learned to write a little better, and I learned to play a little better, um, and the lyrics, and then the big part, which was to let the producer produce a record, and that's what I learned here. Big
Mm-hmm.
And Fernando as well. Man, Fernando, unbelievable. So I took my hands, off the wheel, and that's a lot to learn in a few years, And I got more to learn. I'd love to do just a standard record, um, and I like the records that I've done are just me and piano. Um, but this time I learned because of Denny. Denny said you got to do things to compete with the other people out there on the radio. Yeah, that's a big thing. Somehow you got to get into that ring, you know. And you know more
Yeah.
about it than I do.
Well, it's an interesting thing to where, there's so much beyond just the music when it comes to putting out a record. Yeah, because there's all the stuff that people don't think about unless you're in the business or aware of the business. To where, like Denny was saying, you're competing with all these people. Yeah, for somebody to notice you,
Yeah.
and then, for you, you're not trying to compete with the 20-something artists out there, because
Right.
you're making what the folks that I played your album for, the consensus was, this is music for the adults in the room.
Yeah.
And so now you're in a a more limited market, because radio doesn't care about people 50 plus
Yep.
for the most part.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
They're
so you've got
they're
to,
starting to, though, Michael, because there's a whole bunch of us, and we got
well,
lost.
that's the thing is the
Yeah.
fact that, fortunately, whereas it used to be where radio would play multiple genres, you turn it into top 40 radio, you wouldn't just hear 40 songs that all sound the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have people from all different kinds being played on one station. That doesn't really happen anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. But fortunately, with things like, Americana and roots music and stuff, now that's made home for folks who maybe aren't trying to get the next dance hit.
Yeah. And there's an interesting thing there's a lot of young people that are listening to what mom and dad listened to. And I do a lot of music and kind of therapy and spiritual stuff with kids these days. And you'd be amazed how many of them are listening to these cool old time songs, but their parents introduced them, to them. And there's, great grooves from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. The thing with the music business today, and it'd be nice for me, I really have to thank Cordo Valley Records, and Bruce Cordo and Denny, to be a part of what they're doing in the new music business, with the innovations they have with the musical beat and these cards. I'm getting ready to go to Cleveland, Ohio to do a gig, and I'm going to bring some CDs, but most of the people don't have CD players anymore. The cars don't. So I can bring a whole pack of these, and I'll instruct them. And I think even old people can figure it out. All you do is you just tap your phone, boom, like a point of sale, like at a gas station, and boom, that whole album on there. And I found, like, the people you're talking about that love liner notes, I can put my lyrics on here. And I'm starting to think about my audience, which now I'm able to access, with all this. They got these little keychains, put on your boom. Here's the actual record. So I got to do a little promotion, but to be a part of this innovative new way of getting the music out, and artists can use these cards and the musical beat. It's just an incredible thing. You really got to look into it. But I'm still selling an old album and the music, and the folks will be able to get that album instantly, listen to it. And today I'm going to work on putting some lyrics up. We can instantly add to this stuff, and folks that get the little musical beat app and get the card will have access to everything as it's updated, So it's given me, the artist, this power to control my, how I get paid and my music a little bit more. The opportunities really amazing, but we've stuck to the old school. We're not selling a single, we're selling an old album. And it's pretty cool to combine those two things. What's good about the kids is they'll probably show grandma and grandpa, mom and dad how to really make use of it, because they'll just go, beep, It's really pretty fun, man.
Yeah. Well, I've found that once folks get to a certain age, growing up, radio delivered music to you, so you could hear all the new stuff.
Yeah.
Now, if you're older than the young target demo, you have to search out that music. Yeah. So the fact that Cordo Valley is doing these things to make it easier for folks to access it, because a lot of people, have said, and I've said this on the show many times, people say, wow, I just don't hear stuff like, what I'm looking for, and it's like, no, there's a ton of great music out there, but where in the past it used to be delivered to you, now you have to find it, and once you're willing to do that, they're like, wow, I didn't know all this stuff was out there. It's like, there's still great music being made. You just have to find it. So doing the things like what you're talking about, with the cards and making it easy for folks to get to it is a wonderful thing.
And it's been a slow dance. I mean, we all learn how to use our phones and different things. This technology, though, still kind of blows me away. And I don't want to talk about the science of it because I'm not smart enough, but it's just so easy to do. And for me, with as much music that I have now, I've got 2 or 3 record label deals, with different people, that I can't really do much with that music, unless and it's basically, they're not doing much of anything with it. This gives me the freedom to get my music out there. I'm going to put another album up, actually started to do a couple days ago, called The Compilation. But I go to Cleveland to do some special music with kids, a little song called One Little Red Wagon at a Time, for example. So I put that and 2 or 3 other songs that I'll be doing at special events in my next 4 tour days. And I'm making a nice little album out of that. It'll be available on the beat, and Cordo Valley will take care of the smart part. And I'm able to, tomorrow, boom, bring that to them. And that's for an artist, it takes a lot of pressure off all that stuff, and I can just go play music, and this is really easy to deal with, instead of a big, oh man, we used to carry CDs around, cassettes, I hate to say. Do you remember what those were?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, you remember, DJing events where you'd come in with, 20 crates of albums that you'd have to load into the van, unload, take it in, load it back in, load it back out. Now you walk in with a couple of laptops and you've got 100,000 songs.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I don't think anything will change, though, with the part that if someone can play an instrument and sing a song that touches somebody in the heart, that says, I'm just like you are. And that's still the thing I just pray remains really important, and then if I'm selling this stuff, I want to be able to go play it for you live without any fancy stuff, keep my fingers working.
no matter the technology, it all comes down to the music.
Yeah.
You know, and either, you know, it strikes a chord with folks or it doesn't.
Mhm.
And the more you can do that, the more impact it's going to have on folks, the more they're going to support it. So,
Yeah. I do a lot of work with folks, with mental health issues and lots of stuff, using music as a very powerful healing tool. And it's such a no-brainer that music makes our brain really happy. And when our brain's happy, our body gets happy. So it's used in medicine and science and spirituality. It's used in all that stuff. So to have the opportunity to go sing and play and tell stories for people for an hour and a half or 2 hours is really a healing spiritual thing to be able to do as a musician, And I want to remain, honoring that and feeling humble and grateful that I get to do that. And then banging away on 12-bar blues. I mean, you just can't get any better doing that stuff. So I fit that into my shows because I can do that in my sleep, make mistakes.
I'll tell you what. Getting back to the record.
Sure.
We touched briefly on "Only You." Tell us a little bit about that track, the opening cut.
Well, it's about my wife Nancy, and when I got signed to Muscle Shoals, the story behind it is, I was in the middle of a lot of turmoil and divorce and all that kind of stuff, and then I met my wife down there in Alabama, and man, it was all over, just really fast. And we're still together. And that song is just so fun to play, Mike, bum, 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 just a real simple. And I mean, it sounds, it's kind of old school sounded, but I wanted to put a couple little twists in it. So it's not, but it's just so fun to sing and play. You're like a purple moon and a shining star, and I know that's for us old crowd right there. It really is, because we fell in love, but then we stayed in love. And what you do is you stay. You don't just chase this wild feeling, because that ain't going to last forever. It comes back, but from that moment, she was the only one. And that's her favorite song on the record, of course. Love song.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And I think it was Fernando said, play the roads on this. Because I do it generally on piano, but he said, play the roads. It'll give it a cool little sound, which kind of opened it up a little bit for all of Fernando's guitar playing. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said before, I really like the interplay between you two on that track.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Yeah. And Fernando, too, since we're talking about Denny, Fernando's played with so many people.
Oh, and he's just not going to stop. He's going full steam ahead. I can't even imagine where he'll be. He just keeps ascending and proving himself. And he's creative as all get out. And the fact that you can go over to Fernando's studio and record with him, he's a one-man band. He plays everything really well, everything. So yeah, I just the three of us together. I think there's a little picture on the inside of the album of the three of us that first or second day in the studio, and you can see how happy we are. I'm not even sure we knew we were going to have an album at that time. We're just going.
We're just having fun playing music.
Sure is fun. Somebody's might even pay us for this,
Now the next track, Up on River Road.
Yes, sir.
What's the origin of that song?
It's a real place, and it's a road in Nashville, Tennessee. And up on this road, there's a place called Cumberland Heights. It's a treatment center for people with substance abuse, mental health issues. It's one of the oldest in the country. It's been up there a long, long time. And I get to work there, and I get to watch people heal, and just amazing things happen. So the song is really what happens up at this terrific place. And I intentionally said up on River Road because that just, that tells you where we're going, what this is about. And I wrote it just when I kind of started to work there a little more full time and watching people change. We've all, whatever situation, if you watch somebody change from desperate, sad, a lot of stuff going on, just a little bit of hope, a little bit of hope. And then their kids get to see that, or their husbands or their wives, that change is a really fun, beautiful thing to see. And so that's what that song, is about. And I'm kind of proud. I'm very proud to work there and be able to share that song. How did that song hit you? Did you know? I'm always curious, did you imagine a place where you go to do that?
You know what? It's one of those songs where when you hear it, it works, both literally and metaphorically. Yeah. To where it has that like personal growth, feel to it,
Okay.
So that's how I took it. Is both, you could, one of those songs you can say listen to literally or metaphorically.
And I hope that's what it would. You paint your own picture. That's what people do anyway. Paint your own picture about a positive place. Yeah, I love that song. I love playing that song solo as well, and I do it quite often. And the movement in it is a fun thing for piano player with the notes moving on the left hand. Play it whatever tempo I want, and I'm glad you listened to that song. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Well, what with songs or any art, when you put something out there that can be perceived on different levels, to me it opens it up to a wider audience and people's perception. As it relates to their own lives, allows them to adapt it to fit whatever they're thinking or they're going through or what have you. So,
yeah. And I hope that's what, this does. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you move out of that song into a tender ballad, Before They All Slip Away.
Yeah. Well, you talk about our age group and, a lot of us probably have more time behind us than we do ahead of us. Of course, it's hard to tell with the advancements in medicine and science. I could live to be 250 years old. I don't know if I want to, but, all kidding aside, I think about this remaining time, Michael, that I have. And I think all of us as human beings can remember or know the feeling of maybe wasting a day or two either doing stuff, thinking stuff, being angry, fighting stuff, trying to change people's minds, not accepting the way something's going to be, no matter what you try to do to change it. And so that's really where that song came from. And the love part of it, there's 3 different verses, but I want to love you the best that I can. And I want to show you. It's one thing to buy everybody, your wife a Hallmark card, but it's another thing to take the garbage out and to do, put the dish, all that little stuff. And then there's a section in there where I want to heal our hearts and, get rid of this crud that's standing in our way, because every day is a pretty precious thing, I just think about this interview and just this little time you and I have together, what a precious thing. And it'll just go by. And so I woke up this morning, I go, this is really cool. This guy's going to interview me and I'll do the best I can and I'll stay focused, and that's really what that song is about. I don't want to waste another day, not putting in what I can. Now, some days you're just flat out tired. So those days, the best thing you can do is sleep, right? And rest. But before they all slip away, man, that's a I hope it's a song for our generation, for us.
There you go. Yeah. Now the next track, "Let It Go Tonight." When I was playing it for folks, the as soon as somebody heard it, they said, "You know what? This is the perfect song for a rainy day. You're in the house, just got to relax it. This is like the soundtrack to that kind of day."
Yeah. So I'm an Irishman, and I got a short temper, and I'm recovering from all sorts of stuff. But I know, just an example for a husband and a wife, these little things that get on our nerves, and I can stay angry, and I can just stay. And I don't know where I got this, Mike. I was raised Catholic, and I'm Irish and all that, but something told me early on that I had to be right all the time. I had to know everything there was, even if, God only knows, or whatever, the universe only knows. Had to look good, be right, all these things. I'll just hold on to that stuff. So, and man, it makes for such a really bad day. But I admit that I have held on to things for years like that, And I saw a gentleman do this once in a discussion with a young man who was complaining about his girlfriend at work, And this old man said to the kid, he goes, "Take your hands." He goes, "This is what you're doing." He says, "Do this." And the kid looked at him like he was nuts, but he did it about 3 or 4 times. And the kid just got a smile on his face, That's where that little number started. And, I got some other thoughts into it. But if I can imagine those things I'm holding on to like a little bird in the palm of my hand, you let it go, Because again, getting to be our age, it just ain't worth it, is it? Holding on to, you're smiling and you're nodding your head. That's a good sign. It just isn't worth it. And half the time I thought I was right. I was wrong anyway. I just didn't know. So
there you go.
There you go. And sure as heck, you'll let that little bird go, and then you'll get ruffled about something else. And today, talking about the spirit of a good album and good music, and the way we can access it and stuff. Our society makes a good bit of money and profit off keeping people like this, just keep us like this, and we'll keep pressing and hitting the buttons. And so maybe if there's a little saving grace in this rainy day, like you said, if we can just sit for a minute, listen to stuff like this. Of course, I want you to listen to mine, but just take a breath, let it go, because you'll get back out there in traffic and it'll all ratchet up again, Maybe this is the secret to, it's in and out, so.
Yeah. Well, tell you mentioned, your folks listen to your music.
Yes, sir.
What music have you been listening to most recently that's not yours?
That's not mine? A lot of Ray Charles, strangely enough. And I don't know why. My grandson turned me on to it a little bit. I listened to some Ray Charles, and then I've been listening to some big band stuff. My father played clarinet. My little grandson is unbelievable on clarinet. And he's been playing some stuff for me. We rode around in the car on Saturday in Birmingham, listening to big band, all instrumental music, these old clarinet players, which were the rock stars of that era. And it just gave me some relief to be in the car with my grandson, listening to that stuff. And then both of my grandkids are performers, so we've been listening to a lot of their stuff. A lot of the new music is pretty good too. I'll listen to some stuff. Some of the guys down here in Nashville, some of the new songwriters are just incredible. The power songs, Jelly Roll, that dude, it's coming out with a lot of force,
Mm-hmm.
So maybe It's a good question. What do I listen to? Do I take enough time to sit? But I listen to a lot. I just like listening to a lot of different kind of stuff. I'm always going to be a jazz musician listener, and I'll just love it.
Tell me this, John.
Yeah.
With folks who are familiar with your music, what artist or what record or song would they be most surprised to find in your collection or playlist or whatever, however you're listening these days?
It would be Cat Stevens' "Tea for the Tillerman." That album, that song. Do you remember that at all?
Mm-hmm.
Something about that guy, I kind of missed. He's somebody that's probably influenced me as much as anybody. And that, I have it somewhere over here. "Tea for the Tillerman." It's a really old song. It's just beautiful guitar, singing, melody. They may not be surprised by that. Who I really love is Mark Cohn.
Mm-hmm.
Walking in Memphis. I don't know. I don't think they'd be surprised now that they know me. I almost listen to anything, Well,
I'll tell you, it's funny that you mentioned Mark Cohn, because one of the people I played it for said that this album's a great companion to one of his.
Oh, give them a big hug. I remember when his album came out and I was living in Minneapolis, and it just took my breath away. I go, oh God, I'm going to quit. This guy's just so good. The songwriting and the singing and the intimacy and the nearness of the voice. But he's influenced me a lot, I'm sure, without me knowing it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a great.
We're all sponges. So, I mean, if you like something, it can't help but influence what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I do walking in Memphis once in a while where I work, especially if I know somebody's from Memphis, and what a great song. But that's so far back now that some people don't know who Mark Cohn is. So I think he'll have a second coming around, what a great artist.
Well, see, talk about, I mentioned perspective before. You say that's, Walking to Memphis was so long ago now. For me, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago. you start talking about, Benny Goodman, playing clarinet.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
That seems a while ago.
Just recently, I asked somebody, do you know who Mark Cohn is? And I go, no, I never heard of that guy. I said, well, he never heard of me either, but he's definitely way farther down the road than I am.
Well, tell you, getting back to the album.
Okay.
Yeah, you move into yet another tender ballad. If it weren't for you, tell us about that track.
Denny kind of pushed me to write something in that slower type of tempo, and I remember working on that song, and that song is just an actual sort of a travel log of all these trips my wife and I made. Paris and Jerusalem, Poland, Russia. We drove the Amalfi Coast. We did all these things, and I remember thinking about all of it. And it dawned on me, like, I'm no different than anybody. None of it really would have mattered if I went by myself, and how precious it is to share stuff with people. Just like I didn't do this album myself. There were just hundreds of people influencing, but with a husband and a wife and these trips and all those things we saw them together. And when we look at the pictures now, it kind of reminds me of how important we are to each other, but none of it would have mattered. And you get caught up. We travel a lot and we get caught up a lot. And I think we don't take enough time to come back and process all that stuff that happened. We were in the Sistine Chapel together. We drove the Amalfi Coast. I about died. And then we went into Naples, because I think I'm really good at everything. See, going back to Heather's song. I can driving the Amalfi Coast and then in Naples, that'll kill any human being, in their right mind. And then the Sistine Chapel, we saw that, and all these amazing things. So all of it just came pouring in at one time after I started to formulate the music, what that song would be about. And then Picaro came. And Denny that was all about Denny, just have this thing flood in with those strings in the beginning, like a real stringy ballad. So, nothing matters without the people that are close to us, That's what that's about.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned Steve Porcaro. Any other folks join you on the album?
That's basically the core makeup of the musicians. We're doing some live dates with some different musicians in June. We're going to release this in LA, and Davey Johnstone from Elton's band's going to play, and Porcaro, and we may have a couple other surprise guests playing, And when I think about it, that may have been a good thing, Michael, to keep that thing, you know what I mean? The orchestration, the sounds, it's me and Fernando and Denny. Steve does his little part. We don't introduce too much. I don't know what's the word for that.
It keeps it intimate.
Is that okay? Great. Yeah.
I mean, that was my take on it. So when you hear it for a 3-piece, it's got a very full sound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it also at the same time, it's not overdone. It's, subtle, pleasingly so.
Great. Well, I think mission accomplished on, that, and to no credit to myself, because, leave it to me, I would have added more and more stuff. There's some nice little harmonies on there. And just some little things, not a whole lot of, and plus there's not too many guitars going on at one time, because guitar and piano, they kind of buck in the same sonic places. But that's why Fernando was instantly he's over here and I'm down here, and then I go up here, he stays down there, So credit those guys for that, keeping it simple.
Well, see, and that's the thing is when, they're complementing, the guitar and piano are complementing each other. Then it's like a kind of musical conversation, as opposed to two people talking over themselves, over each other on it, which, has happened.
Yeah. Boy, that's a really good way to put that. And we tend to, I think when we learn to play live, I'm just speaking for myself. These guys are all studio cats and really good, but I learned to play, live. And that's really what it was. A lot of people in a pretty loud conversation. And I think, you asked me earlier, what have I learned? I guess I've learned to record better, to speak when I'm spoken to, musically. But ultimately, I'm kind of a snob in that there's the piano and then there's my voice. So nothing else while this is going on. I think that's the intimate part.
Yeah. Well, tell me this: are you any tour dates, concert dates coming up?
Go to Cleveland, actually Sandusky, Ohio. I leave Thursday. And I'm doing a residency there. So I'm working with a couple of schools. One is a high school, one's a special needs school. Another is a arts academy. And I'm going to teach them a couple of songs of mine, Like a Child, which is on the record. And they'll sing along at the concert with me, and we'll talk about some things. And then the concert Saturday night there in Sandusky. Then I go to Minneapolis to the Recovery Church, play there on the 21st, and then the LA on the 28th, which will kind of be the first 3 releases. Later, we're getting some stuff for Seattle and New York City and all those details together, but we'll get them together. I'm
Oh,
looking
hopefully
forward to it.
Chicago gets added to that list.
Well, you know what? Man, I'm in Nashville, and I used to play at a jazz club in Aurora all the time. Forgot the name. One of those little places with a blue neon sign, you know. But I love Chicago. So see if
It's a
you
great
can
town.
get that going for us, Michael.
If only I knew, folks.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Well, tell me this, we're coming up on our hour here, John. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we touch on before we bring this one to a close?
Well, just big thanks to Corda Valley. I got my cards ready. Boom. Just like buying gas. And, you know, thank Bruce Cordo, and I always thank Denny and Fernando and for our little partnership, which is kind of just beginning, really, in a lot of ways. And kind of, you know, to close all this thing, we all stumble, and being humans, just about being making mistakes. You know, it's how we learn and stuff. But just maybe by the end of the day, you know, we hope that we all show our better sides, you know, or most of it. And I hope they kind of got that from this interview.
Well, you know, it's striking that emotional chord with folks.
Oh,
Yeah, is the key, and then from there, yeah, they can take that to do with, yeah, however it's going to impact their life.
that's right.
So, all right. Well, tell you what, John, throughout the show, we've had your website and info and where folks can find your music scrolling across, so they can go to johnmcandrew.com, find your music info on concerts and what have you, and then they can, you know, hear all the good stuff.
Great.
So, all right. Well, with that, John, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Michael, for your hour, taking this time out of your day.
Yeah, not a problem at all. So,
All
all right, everybody. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.
Thank you.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.